Welcome to the Fit for Halter podcast. I'm your host, Amy Zabel, and we're here to bring content and community to the amateur halter exhibitor. Friends, I want you to get comfortable and prepare yourself for an inspiring conversation. I'm excited to introduce Erin Brown, known as the Concrete Cowgirl.
Hi, Amy. Hi, listeners. Pull up a chair and get comfy.
Yes, we are planning on it. So Erin began her riding career at the Fletcher Street Stables in 1990 to then managing Fletcher Street shortly after graduating high school for 12 years. Brown attended the W.B. Saul Agricultural High School in Philadelphia, graduating with a major in equine science. She's been competing with horses for nearly 30 years under hunt seat and stock seat riding disciplines, along with showing halter horses. She currently has 2 stallions that are actively showing halter, an Appaloosa and a quarter horse. She has extensive experience managing stables and is a strong advocate for riding programs serving her local communities. She worked as an assistant barn manager, program director, and lead riding instructor for Philadelphia's iconic Work to Ride program for several years. Erin is currently the executive director of Philadelphia Urban Riding Academy. It's a nonprofit 501c3 established as an outgrowth and extension of the original Fletcher Street Stables, focused on outreach, education, and preservation of the history of the urban Black cowboys of Philadelphia, and creating a pathway for inner city youth to interact and learn to care for horses. PURA was established in partnership with filmmakers from Concrete Cowboy, starring Idris Elba, where Brown worked as a movie consultant, a stunt rider, and an extra. She has also done projects for Red Wing Shoes, Wrangler, and several docuseries locally and internationally. Her story has been the cover and featured story in magazines across the globe. Brown is an executive director of Concrete to Show Jumping, which is also known as CTSJ, a nonprofit 501c3 established in partnership with Melissa or Missy Clark of North Run Stables to bridge diversity and inclusion in the horse industry for both youth and adults. Erin is an active representative of the USEF Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion External Thought Leaders Group and contributed to the development of the USEF DEI Action Plan from 2013 to 2019. Brown worked with the Police Department's Mounted Patrol Unit in Philadelphia as a trainer and caretaker. Brown is the owner and founder of Concrete Horsemanship LLC, which creates successful partnerships through a concrete understanding of your horse. Erin, you are a gift to the horse industry. Can you tell us where this all started, where your love for horses began?
Well, it was a weekend trip. My dad was a local metal fabricator in Philadelphia. He had at that time, it was a small business, but the cowboys that were in the surrounding area would take their trailers to my dad's shop for minor welding repairs. And he thought it would be a fun thing to take my brother and myself to the stable one day to see these horses. And what was supposed to be a day trip turned into here I am today. It was every day after that. There were like horses in the middle of the city, in the city, with chickens and ducks and goats. And we had a cow back then, and it was a legit farm in the middle of one of the roughest areas in North Philadelphia.
Wow.
Yep.
Does that farm still exist, or any part of that farm still exists?
It was Fletcher Street. So it's still there. It's hanging on by a thread, but it is still there. There's still chickens and ducks, and goats, but no cows. And that was 1990, so it's changed so much over the years.
I bet. So in the midst of your nonprofit work, we'll start by talking about your halter passion for halter horses. What is it about halter that you love?
As a child, I would, if hanging around Fletcher Street, if you had access to a quarter horse journal way back then, you treated that magazine, even though it may have been old, but you treated it like it was the Bible. And you know, you would see these absolutely stunning horses in there. And I would just sit there and look through the pages and daydream and you know, compare them to my horse at the time and horses that we had around and wish that I would always see myself as a child in this book. And they Halter horses, they were just exceptionally stunning to me. And they, you know, I got it as an adult. One of my board members, he bought an Appaloosa colt. And I never really cared for Appaloosas because a lot of them back in my younger years that I saw, they didn't have a tail and they had these funky little eyes. So, you know, I've always loved a horse with a tail. So this one, you know, I've come to see that Appaloosas they can have tails. And I named this colt, this was 2019. I named this colt Commander of a Dream. And I started channeling back into my childhood, like, oh my goodness, okay, I want to take a baby from the weanling stage and show under every discipline and have it be a world champion in every discipline. That was my thought pattern. So I started showing him Halter, not regionally. It was like local shows, like backyard shows. And a friend of mine yanked my chain. He said, Erin, why are you showing this horse, you know, at these little backyard shows? You need to show him regionally. There's breed shows for this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to get his feet wet and get him comfortable. But those are my own nerves and insecurities and not thinking that he was that good. And so I finally said, you know what? I'm going to take him to a breed show. I found one that was close by in New Jersey. I went, he cleaned the house. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So COVID happened and I wanted to go. Missy Clark, she's a godsend to me and my nonprofit, both of them. She's like a fairy godmother. And we were talking one day and she was asking how Dream was doing and with showing. And I said, the World Show is coming up and one of these days I'm going to get to go. And she said, well, when is it? And I said, it's in October. And I've never been to a World Show ever because, you know, it's expensive.
Right.
And she said, well, my EB, that's what she calls me. She said, you're going. And I said, what do you mean I'm going? And she said, I said, I can't, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And she said, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and register for your classes and I'll handle the rest. So she had this, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to fit in because it's just me. And I've seen like online, like the show barns and everybody has like these big fancy stall curtains and stuff. She had a stall curtain delivered to my house with every last one of my sponsors on it that says the Concrete Cowgirl and this beautiful, stunning trunk. It's this oak trunk and it says the Concrete Cowgirl and it's got PURA's colors. And I cried. And then here comes, it's like a real Cinderella story. There's like this, I don't know, luxury, because she's like a hunter jumper. She travels around the world doing that. She and her husband. This luxury horse van, I don't know what the heck to call it, pulled up in Philadelphia to pick up this little scraggly colt of mine that I believed in so much. And he had like a first class round trip ticket to Fort Worth, Texas. And
Wow.
my plane ticket, she covered everything. And I cried so much because I just didn't understand why. I mean, I knew we've only known each other for a short time at that moment. And like, this woman was a complete stranger, and she believes in me, my vision, and what I'm trying to do with the kids. And she made all of this happen for me. It was a legit Cinderella story.
Wow.
We get to Fort Worth, and I start to see. I thought I was going down to the wrong class, like, because the other yearlings, was he a yearling? Yeah, the other yearlings, they look like monsters compared to him. And I said, "What the? Is this the right class?" And I'll never forget. There's an APHC stallion who I loved back then, and still to this day, flashing my assets. He was a monster compared to my horse. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But it was, I didn't care how I came out placing. I think it was like 6 or 7, but there was only 6 and 7 in the class. But it was just, I'm here. Like, I've dreamt about this day since I was a child. Like, and I'm really, really here. And this woman made this happen for me. And she did it his second year too. His 2-year-old year. She did it
Wow.
again. So, and then I think it was after my birthday of 2022, 6 days later, I came in the barn and I found him dead.
Oh, Erin, I'm
So,
so sorry.
yeah, I didn't know too much about, I didn't know anything about PSSN at that time.
Hmm.
And I knew about HYPP because I had an HYPP horse. And when I found out about that, when I bought this horse, who was once a halter horse, I did every research all the research I could find on HYPP. And my vet has been my vet since I was a child. And he was like, Erin, it's not rocket science. It's nutrition. You got this. This horse has been perfect, but PSSM, I didn't know. I came in the barn. I found this horse dead. I screamed so loud. We're at a show facility temporarily until our barn is done in Philly. I
Hmm.
screamed so loud that the manager of the facility heard me from her office to my stall, and she drove up there, and I'm just like laying on my horse.
Mm.
And I was pretty much done with life myself then. So it was the most heartbreaking and traumatic thing I had ever experienced, I must say. But
Wow. I am so
that's it.
sorry. That is a
Thank you.
story. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So after that, did you get another Appaloosa?
There was another Appaloosa from the same breeder, but he was at a friend of the family's farm in Maryland, and he was turning a 2-year-old, and he wanted to, this guy was like, Erin, he's going to be excellent in color, and because he's just so loud, and there was a lot of white, and white always, like, on a horse scared me because I'm like,
Hmm.
how do you keep that clean?
Right?
And and I'm OCD, so I mean, you need to be clean all the time. So I picked him up maybe 2 weeks before my colt died. I drove to Maryland, picked him up. I said, okay, well, I'll show him and see what can. And this colt, he literally came from out of the field in Maryland. Like, he had like minimal handling. He's never seen sadly, he has never seen the farrier at the time. He has never had a bath. And I'm like, well, I'll see what I could do. And the guy was like, well, what do you think? And I said, no expectations. And, when Dream died, I had lost all interest in showing because they were
Mhm.
supposed to show together, that not shortly after I picked him up. And, you know, a few people were in my ear, like, Erin, you have to keep going. You have to keep going. You cannot stop. And then, Dream would want you to keep going. I'm like, shucks. Okay. So I took this colt within 2 weeks, took him to his first show, and he cleaned the house. He
Wow.
literally learned how to stand. He learned how to lead, see the farrier, get a bath, get body clip, and stand square in 2 weeks. And the setting up part, I kind of faked it until I made it in the show ring, but he had the idea of it. And
Mhm.
it was like making me like, okay, ApHCs are very, very smart, and they learn very, very fast. So when Dream died, the guy was like, well, listen, I know you lost your boy. I want you to have this one. And we could do it together. And here I am. He's a 4-year-old now.
Wow.
So,
Is he still a stallion?
he is. Yes, he
Do you
is.
do any breeding with him?
They're both going to the quarter horse, and the ApHC will be standing in 2025.
Okay. Wow, I can't wait to
So,
see it. Can't wait
yes.
to see the pictures.
Yes.
Fantastic. So what you have a quarter horse stallion. Tell us about him.
So back to this fairy godmother, Missy Clark. She had, I want to say 2019, she had bought a halter horse, a Palomino. And and she's like, "Do you like him?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Okay, well, how much is he?" And I said, "He's 5,500." And she said, "Go get him." And I'm like, "What? Who does this?" Like, okay, but it was a lot of money to me. Like $5,000 is still a lot of money to me today. But he was a gelding, and his name was FG Mighty Cool. And I had one of the boys, Javon at the time must have been 7 years old. I had Javon showing him as uh, a youth halter horse, and he was doing really, really well. And Javon he's on the spectrum, and he has ADHD, ABCDEFG, everything else under the sun. But when, it was to the point I had to tell his grandmother, do not give him any medication or his medication when he comes to the barn,
Mhm.
because he would be zonked out. And, you cannot be zoned out around horses. And I would watch the interaction with he and a horse where he was completely in tune and he was paying attention, and he would start talking to me about his school day and what he learned. And everyone, you just want to medicate this child, but you have to kind of accelerate his mind in other areas. So he was showing the Palomino gelding on the regional circuit for a little while, and I went to Virginia with the ApHC colt, and to show him there. And the bar manager, the woman that runs the facility, she's calling me. I'm thinking she's calling me to see how the horse show went. And I could hear her voice, and she said, "Hey, Erin, where are you?" I said, "I'm on my way back to New Jersey from the horse show." And she said, "I got some bad news for you. Your Palomino is gone." And I said, "Gone? Like, what do you mean gone?" And she said, "He's in his stall and he's dead."
Wow.
And I'm like, what? Okay. And so apparently he had a heart attack. The necropsy report said he had a heart attack.
Wow.
And and this was a month after I lost my ApHC colt. So, I just didn't understand. I was just like so numb. I've never seen horses die. Like,
Hmm.
growing up, I mean, I've seen other people's horses die. But my childhood horse, I had him, he was a stallion, a quarter-horse stallion by obvious conclusion. I had him from the day he was born until the day he died. Like, I got him when I was 11 years old, and he died when I was 27, I think. So we
Hmm.
grew up together.
Yeah.
So this, I just didn't understand, and I I talked to an animal communicator. Might sound well, she's like a medium. Like, I wanted to know answers of why this was happening to me, because
Mhm.
I've had like so much death from 2017 to then, so much. And she said the universe had to move these two out of the way to bring two in that are better. I'm like, what? Okay. So fast forward a little bit, a couple months later, Fossil Gate is having a dispersal sale.
Okay.
And I'm looking through the catalog, and I'm like, okay, well, I can never afford one of these, but I'm just going to watch the auction anyway. And Missy Clark, she said, what are you doing? I said, looking at the Fossil Gate auction. And she said, do you see something on there you like? And I said, there's a few. And my ex-boyfriend at the time, he was like, picking this buckskin coat. And I wasn't really sold on him because he had like a funky color. Like, he wasn't like a true buckskin. He was more like a sooty buckskin.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, I started bidding on him. And it's like gambling, and I would never be a good
Right.
gambler.
Right.
And I would just get these email notifications like, number 5, lot 555, outbid you. And I said, yeah, okay, bid again. Like, who do you think this is? And I wasn't even like watching like the price. Like, I was just like, you're not going to beat me, whoever you are. And it was like, they get down to the last 10 seconds and you get another notification. You've been outbid by a lot. So finally, I don't remember how much he was. He was in the double digits. And I know he was the second highest selling horse from the Fossil Gate auction.
Okay.
And Missy Clark was like, so did you get a horse? I said, I did. But I was more so like trying not to get beat, and I wasn't looking at the price. And she said, how much was he? And I forget what it was, but I told her, and she said, woohoo, congratulations. When do we pick him up? And I'm like, woohoo, congratulations.
Right.
like,
What have I done?
I, right. And I'm like, do you want me to pay half? Or something, because I'll find it. Like, I will. I'll come up. And she said, no, I want you to get this horse, get him home, and, continue to do your thing, continue to live your dream. And I'm like, what? So I bought we got the colt by Born Legacy, who I swear is his spitting image darn near.
Hmm.
And he is one of the stallions that I'm currently showing. And I think that year we took him to the Halter Million,
Hmm. What year was that?
2022.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, well, I've been here for Appaloosa World twice, but this was a different ball game. And, quarter horse is much tougher than Appaloosa. But,
Okay.
he was a nice horse. He wasn't really fitted or anything, because I was still like learning.
Hmm.
And I met Karina, and she actually
Hmm.
banded him for me. And she said, well, his mane is on the wrong side. I'm like, "Oh, well, this is the side it's growing on, so like," and she and her husband, they helped me so much that weekend, or however long we were there. And Joe was like in the bleachers, and he's like got his fingers at 1, 2, 3, 4 and telling me which feet to move. And I've just been so fortunate to meet so many amazing people in this industry, because it wasn't always like this for me. So it's been great.
Wow. There's so much there that people who aren't part of the halter industry or are just getting started could um, really appreciate and gain a lot of insight from. My husband and I are relatively new to the industry as well, or to the halter industry, and we have experienced similar people, generous, kind, helpful people who've just, while we've not had a Missy Clark, we've had folks like the Holmans, specifically like the Holmans, who have helped us. But there's people that we've encountered along the way that, similar to you, that have just been really helpful. So, how do you balance your full professional life with workouts and grooming and chores for your own horses?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
So I start my day at 4 o'clock. Because we're this barn in Philadelphia, I've had to raise darn near 3 million for this project. It's
Wow.
it's a city building that we're converting. It's an existing city building that we're converting into a barn for the youth and the community, but it's in the park. Like, one side of the street, there is a residential neighborhood, but you cross the street and this building sits in the like back to like 400 feet away from the street in the park, and there's a trail system. It's a lake or creek. It's something special.
Mm.
So, it's a $3 million project. We have 400,000 left to raise, and it feels like I'm drowning. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
no. So I start my day at 4 o'clock and make a cup of coffee. I whip out my laptop and I get caught up on emails. And I make sure I try not to social media too much, because I have the attention span of a fruit fly and will get lost in my day.
That's
So as long,
fabulous.
yes, I'm honest with it. So I make sure I'm out of the door by 5:30, no later than 6 o'clock. That puts me to the barn at 6:30 or 6:30. Feed, throw 2 mares and 2 geldings outside. I fly through their stalls and bring them back in, and then I get to the 2 stallions, clean their stalls, groom them real quick, throw their sweats on, tie them up, clean the other 2 stallion stalls who did not do anything. And I, start the workouts. My farrier, he helped me get this golf cart this year, along with the Appaloosa, where he came from. They helped me get this golf cart, which is a game changer for
Yes.
exercising a
Hmm.
halter horse. So I, do their workouts. tie them up for a little bit, and whatever remaining barn work I have to do, I knock that out the way and take their sweats off and sponge them down, groom them again, and then I get home, hop in the shower. I have to take a power nap. I tell myself that like it's a must because I'm like
Mhm.
mentally transitioning from barn work to executive director. Now I'm once I wake up, I'm doing Zoom meetings and going over contracts and talking to this builder and that builder, all for this barn. So my day is pretty much like, it's like a routine. It's like a strict routine. Not really strict, but it's a routine that if something falls out of line or something, I don't think I would know how to like, I would probably zonk out mentally, like, oh no, I'm
Right?
melting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I always tell myself, I tell my dad, he'll make a joke about a nap because, he's an entrepreneur and's been successful. He said, a nap? You sleep when you die. No, I have to transition from barn, farm, whatever, to executive director. So let me take my peaceful nap and transition peacefully.
That's a great idea.
Uh,
What a good practice.
yes.
It works in Spain, right? Where they have a little siesta in the middle of their day.
I don't know why. I remember kids in elementary school and stuff would complain so much about naps. I was never one of those kids
Mm.
because I love a nap
Amen.
faithfully.
Amen. Nap time. I would take that. I would happily take it back. I'd start
Right?
it up again. Yes. Yeah. I love it. So, you talked a little bit about your workouts and a lot of grooming, which is a common theme with halter horses. What about your feeding and any supplements that you do or don't use? What have you learned and what do you feed?
I'm not going to lie to you. When I first started with Dream, I wanted to know, how do you get them to, because I didn't work him out or anything. I don't know what my poor little self was thinking, but you just don't know. And a lot of
Mhm.
people were so, to me, unapproachable. My first year at the World Show, so I didn't really know. Um, I didn't know what to do. And someone told me, they said, feed them till you're about the founder. And I'm like, what? No, like that cannot. So like, no, that can't be right. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? And this woman literally told me, you get a thermometer like you put on your head for your temperature, and you take the temperature of their foot. And that never set right with me. And I'm like, this cannot be right. And no, like, because this horse is not just a, an object. They stay with me until, they're no longer, able to go on
Mhm.
any further. And
Mhm.
they have to have a career after Halter. So no. And I think um I was just feeding like Fiber Max, which Mitch Leonarski, his wife is actually the bar manager at where I'm boarding.
Okay.
And he asked me, he said, what are you feeding? And I told him, and he looked at the feed bag and he said, you have stallions. This is too high in fat. All this is going to their neck. And I'm like, well, what? But look at all the other good stuff that's in there.
Right.
And he was like, he told me about Sentinel Safe Start. So I started feeding that. And he also, does laser on their necks. So I would just sit there and pick his brain and ask him questions. And I would ask his wife questions. And So the halter horses, they are on Sentinel Safe Start, and they don't get any supplements, except for the Born Legacy colt. He gets vitamin E for the PSSM,
Mhm.
and they're on the best. I mean, the best Western alfalfa that we have in this area. So, because a lot of guys and people from the city and Fletcher Street and surrounding farms are like, I know they on steroids. And I'm like, no, they're not. They actually eat little to nothing with grain. But,
Mhm.
you know, you can feed, like, they have the best hay in the world. And that makes all the difference to me is, because they're grazing animals. So I try to explain that to my people at the same time. Like, you don't have to feed that much grain because they really, especially in the off season, they barely eat grain. And they still maintain their weight just from the hay, but they're also not working 5 days a week either. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah. So that's, pretty much what they eat. And then um Gretchen and Tim Jackson, Gretchen, she is, she looks very unapproachable. She doesn't look mean, but she looks she's about her business. She don't have time to talk to nobody, but she's the complete opposite. And she and Tim Jackson have kind of scooped me up, and they, want to do stuff with the kids. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, the barn's not done, but they give me a lot of tips and pointers too.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they have been like on the APHC side of things, they have been like some real life angels.
Sounds like
So
you've been surrounded by people like that. That's pretty amazing.
I'm trying to tell you, because growing up and competing, it was a different story, like
Mhm.
in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's which kind of scared me because I rode as a hunter and a jumper majority of my entire life, or equitation. And I remember like traveling to Maryland with my uncle and a bunch of kids from North Philly.
Mhm.
And I remember going to register, and these young ladies, I wish I could see them today. But they were like, black people are here. And I'm like, what? And I'm like 13. I'm like, did I just hear this? And it was
Yeah.
like this rural town in Maryland. And I'm like, and I was so distraught. And I told my
Mhm.
uncle, and he said, I've always tried to protect you from this kind of stuff. And I didn't want to show anymore. And, we had this stock trailer that had spray paint and graffiti all over it because of knuckleheads in the neighborhood. But I was
Mhm.
really embarrassed. And, people would always ask where I'm from. And I would say, oh, I'm in Fairmount Park. I'm not actually saying Fletcher Street or in the middle of the hood. And my uncle
Uh-huh.
heard me and he said, why did you say that? And and I said, because I don't want people, you know, I don't even think I gave him an answer. And he told me, he said, don't you ever be ashamed of where you come from. And he said, you are sitting here competing with 40 and $50,000 horses with a horse that was born and raised in the hood in North Philly, and you're winning.
Mm.
And because we didn't have a riding arena. So he would set up tires and cones and barrels and put cinder blocks on top of them and make a jumping course in a high school football field, state like field. Like, so I would have a course, and that's what I practiced on, but I had to ride to there.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, so, and he said, you are winning, so don't you ever be ashamed of, where you come from. And he said, you're just as good as they are and anyone else out here. And then I was a child, so you're not, there was always that rule, you're not supposed to ride a stallion until you're 18. But he was
Mm-hmm.
so quiet, no one knew that he was a
Mm-hmm.
stallion. And I remember the gate person was like, "Is that a stallion?" I'm like, "They ain't grapefruits." And I just went in the ring,
Like it was perfectly normal.
right.
That's
So
fantastic.
meeting
Oh
people
my
like the
gosh.
Holmans and the Jacksons and so
Mm-hmm.
many other people have been so welcoming that kind of broke these fears in the back of my brain. So
Yeah,
it's a blessing.
that's incredible. I can't speak for any other industry right now because I'm not participating in any other discipline than halter. But I feel like the playing field is quite level from a human perspective. While there's folks with lots of experience to folks that are brand new, really it feels as though there's an entry opportunity for anybody, no matter what
Right,
level of experience you have, or even the quality of your horse.
right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I was it last year at Nationals? I think last year at the Evolution Nationals, this guy, he was in the registration office and he and his wife, they were very, 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 very country. And he was just so proud that he came to the Appalachian Nationals with his stallion. And you know, he was just, you could tell this was his first show, and he even said it, but he wasn't dressed to code, or how you're, dress pants, suit, tie. And his horse had this long mane, and his wife banded it the best she could. But some of the comments that I heard from people were so discouraging and so mean and so evil. And it was like triggering another side of my brain where I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
flip crap over up in there. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, how, like, instead of talking about him, help him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and show him. And I couldn't even find out where he was stalled at to introduce myself or even give him some pointers. And, you know, the same thing happened after that in Maryland. I'm like, what is God testing me? But this girl, she had a stallion that she was so proud of, and we were showing at the Southern Maryland Quarter Horse show. And she stalled next to me, and she had like next to nothing, like as far as getting this horse ready. And I overheard her and her friend talking, and they were talking about Duke, who's the Born Legacy colt. We were next to them, and she was saying it was her first show, and they didn't have hoof polish. They didn't have so much stuff, but she was really just trying to get started. So I surprisingly was on time for once, or early. So I, helped this girl get her horse together the best. She, like, look, girl, you want to do this. And she was really discouraged at first. Like, she did not want to show. And I'm like, you have to start from somewhere. And I told her about Dream, how he was this scraggly little Appaloosa colt that I just loved so much, and I wanted everybody else to love him too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hope, I think we connected a couple times after the show, but I hope she's still like showing, because you have to help the people that are coming in. And that's what helps the industry thrive and strive, is to keep going. And help someone else. You got to bring new people in, and you got to leave like the mean girl kind of attitude and behaviors. Leave that in your adolescence, not even
Mm-hmm.
then, but you want to help build this industry and welcome as many people and new faces, and it brings in more competition versus, you see the same people every week and like, hey, 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 you guys here too? Hey, okay. So it's, I think there are some welcoming people, but I think
Mhm.
we need to open these doors a whole lot more. Like, and I'm not sure if people are shy or they just don't want to be bothered with people. Am I shy? Kind of, but I will, like, assist. Like,
Mhm.
I help you the best I can and give you all the tips and pointers that I know. Because for a while, some people treat it like it's some big secret. I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be that. Why do you want to show against yourself or the same people? Like, allow more people to come in and welcome them and help them, and they'll, pay it forward and do it for someone else when it's their turn to. I think that's how it should be.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, we're not a perfect bunch, are we? But we are
No.
a mixed crew of personalities and people. It's kind of like when you think about your work life and how there are so many different personalities and types of people who are working together for the same cause. And I think in the show ring, we all have the same desire for ourselves, perhaps, but we're still that dynamic mix of people, sometimes awkward, sometimes shy, sometimes outgoing, and pairing that with something that we're very passionate about and emotional about at times, our horses, is not an easy feat, I don't think. But
Yeah, it's my first time at the Quarter Horse Congress. I think that was 2022. I called Karina or text her or whatever. I said, "Are you going to the Congress?" She said, "No, my husband is. What do you need?" And I said, "Well, they don't have hot water here and it is cold." And she said, "I'll have Joe bring the vacuum cleaner." And Joe, I never seen a man do a braid or put a tail in. I said, "What?" And it just was so ironic that this big behind facility, I'm in the same row with Gretchen and Tim Jackson. And they're like, "Whatever you need, we're right here, Erin." And I'm like, "Oh my God, thank you." Because I was like traumatized. Like, why is the arena so far from these stalls? So that means I have to, get this mile walk on like super duper
Mhm.
early just to be on time. But I've always been able to find familiar faces at a big
Mhm.
show that I know that, and to see that they offer help, because a lot of times I'm by myself.
Mhm.
So it's awesome.
Yeah. Where can we find you showing this summer? Where will you be?
Just found out yesterday I am going to the Appaloosa Nationals.
Okay.
Um, Gretchen and Tim Jackson I bred my mare to Flash of My Assets, their stallion, last year. So they have the mare and the baby, or he should be a weanling, next month. They're going to take him to a couple futurities. I'm aiming for Buckskin World, um, and definitely Quarter Horse Congress, and hopefully Quarter Horse World. It's just like, okay, now I have the horses for this job, but it's still kind of like the financial burden of it
Mhm.
all, because, I'm sitting here building this nonprofit, and, it's tough. Like, when I left the police department, I left in 2019 at the very beginning of COVID. And um, my mama, she said, COVID, people have their theories or whatever they want on it, but I know too many personal people that were sick and everything else, and I knew I've had a compromised immune system since I was a child. So I'm like, I'm not playing with this stuff. And y'all want to be walking around here coughing and sneezing? No, thank you. I'm going to stay home. I gladly took a leave of absence. And I told myself the day I walked out, I said, I'm not coming back here. And my mama said, Erin, how are you going to pay your mortgage? And blah, blah, blah. I said, Mama, God got me.
Mm-hmm.
And then came the contracts with Wrangler and then Red Wing. And then, I pulled out my 401k and I was listening to a podcast one day and they were like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, but you're currently working for someone else, you have to, put your dream and your passion first, or it's always going to be second. So I told my mom, I said, I'm taking a leap of faith. And then came the Missy Clarks and that helped me, build this organization and get it to where it is today. It's still not completed. Still living off of a wing and a prayer. Because I don't believe I can't allow myself to take a paycheck from an organization when I got so much fundraising to do. And people are always like, Erin, you have to pay yourself. And I'm like, well, when this barn is finally completed, I feel like then I can.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe every single cent and penny has to go back into it. And I'm thankful for the mom that I have because she has really been picking my butt up every time I tried to fall. So I'm hoping there's one of my board members has been sponsoring the quarter horse stallion for him to show. So as long as he's allowing me to get to these places like Buckskin World and
Mm-hmm.
Congress,
Mm-hmm.
I will be there because he's ready more than ever now.
That's fantastic. I can't wait to be watching you at those shows. We
I hope I
don't
meet
know
you
that
at
we'll,
one of them.
I know. I'm going to have to find a way. I would not hate getting to any of those shows to see you and see the horses. So let's transition to, you've touched on PURA quite a bit, the Philadelphia Urban Riding Academy. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What are the primary goals of PURA?
Well, okay, so we're going to take it back
Sure.
to the backyards. I call them backyard stables, but in the city, there are maybe like 50 or 60 abandoned buildings that over the past 100 years turned these buildings into horse stables. The Black Cowboys turned them into horse stables
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much squatted for until you couldn't squat no more until the early 2000s. And Fletcher Street is one of the first and one of the last still standing. A lot of these barns in the city are going to redevelopment and gentrification. And, this is something that keeps kids safe and out of, you know, trouble. Because a lot of my peers that I grew up with they they're not here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that I grew up with around the horse stable, they may have gotten into some kind of trouble. They would wander off from the stable, get into some kind of trouble in their neighborhoods. They may have gotten locked up or may have not, but every time they gotten into trouble and they would come back home, the first place they come to was the horse stable.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a family outside of your family. You don't know where, like, um, what's going on in these people's home lives. But you have this family, this community of people, and you all share the same love for horses and the same community of people they rallied together my whole childhood for me to compete on the Mid-Atlantic circuit because my mom was a single mom. So these, we know horses heal, horses change lives, and PURA, the original executive director, his name is Eric Miller, and he is also the reason for the movie Concrete Cowboy. He connected with the filmmakers and Netflix. Oh no, not Netflix at the time. It was like Idris Elba, and he would tell me, he was one of my boarders, and he's like, "I'm going to make a movie," and I'm like, "Okay, make a movie." Like, he was this big old poke your chest out kind of guy. So I just thought he was just, okay, whatever. But he was a boarder that would buy horses for the kids in the neighborhood. And I would, do rides on his horses, a lot of them, and flip them. And he just liked that side of it. He loved money. So maybe he started, he initiated the vision of PURA with the filmmakers, and I still have the text message and the text thread that's, when he first filed for the nonprofit status. And he said, "I'm going to get my own barn that can't be taken away, and, and give people, history repeats itself." And so maybe a month before filming the movie, he was gunned down and killed. So the filmmakers were like, "Erin, well, I reached out to them. I met them once, but these big old Hollywood guys, like I met them once and I reached out to them on Instagram, like, "Hey, you guys need to call me." And I let them know what had happened, and they immediately packed up in California, flew to Philly, to, see what they could do and help and figure out why. And I had no idea, I've only known this guy, the horse stable side of him. I never knew his extracurricular. But he had one of the biggest hearts. Anytime you go to the auction and just buy horses for kids in the neighborhood. And they would all be he had, I think, 18, 19 horses at one time on Fletcher Street. So they were like, "Well, about PURA, what do you want to do with it?" And this was 2019. They said we could just put it on the back burner and just focus on the movie, or do you want to step up and, run it? And I said, "Well, I think if I don't run it, he's going to come back and haunt me," because I was like only one of the few people from the community that knew about PURA and the location. I went with him with the council members to pick out this place where we're building now. And they pull out this sheet of paper. They said, "Well, here is our current executive board." And Eric, or we call him E, he had my name spelled a couple different ways. And they're like, "Well, who is this?" I said, "Me." "Who is this?" "Me again." "Who is this?" "Me."
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, "What?"
You were the board.
Right. Yes. And I'm like, "Well, that's not possible but he just wanted to fill up the spots until he could find people that he could trust. Because we come from a community where people try to ruin and take things from you. It's like the real life crabs in the barrel. So I'm like, okay, well, we had an attorney working with PURA, and I sat down and put together an actual real life board. And I knew nothing about running a nonprofit. Yes, I worked for one, for the Work to Ride program, for years. And I called her, and her name is Leslie. And I said, how do I do this? And she said, "You got to do a business plan." And she's like this real, She has a big heart, but she is so uncouth, sandy blonde hair. And I said, well, how do I do that? And she said, you have to read. And I'm like, okay. There's no like format for this or something. And she got me a book, Business Plans for Dummies.
Nice.
And I'm like, there's no audio book or nothing for this. So, you know, I did the business plan and I knew what it took coming from Fletcher Street. What was done for me, it's time to do it for a younger generation because I've seen the impact of horses and healing, especially in gun violence in Philadelphia is out of this world right now. It's heartbreaking, it's disgusting. It's, you know, these kids need recreation. And with so many recreation centers that the few that were left before COVID, they closed down. So, but one thing that's still around are horses. And kids love it. And you know, that is something it's a different type of recreation because not every kid wants to play basketball. Not every kid wants to play football. Some kids want to ride horses. And I think about my childhood. I think about all my friends that I grew up with in the city that are not here. Even people in high school, but all my friends, with the exception of two, they're dead due to like drug overdoses and stuff like that. And that started, you know, if not in high school, shortly after. And if I did not have a horse growing up, and if I didn't have that responsibility to go to the barn every day and to work a part-time job at Petco to pay for this horse's board, I often wonder would I be with my friends? Sure, I would have, because I would have had nothing but free time to do what they were doing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So the main vision of PURA is to open doors for recreation, to, you know, give these kids something that can't be taken away from them. And it teaches them not only horsemanship, but responsibility, work ethics, and partnership, and so many different things. I have a kid now, he could not, he came to me, he was nonverbal, he was autistic. And his mama told me, you know, he doesn't really talk, or if he does, it'd be real low. Child, I done walked away this boy with a horse. He talks. You know, it took some time, but he talks.
Oh, that's amazing.
And you know, that's exactly it's a different type of therapy. The
Mm-hmm.
long-term vision, not real long, but you know, I initiated like a veterans program with a couple different places in Philadelphia. Like, please bring them to the barn for therapy. And, you know, just the presence of a horse can change your day by so much. So,
Mm.
and
Amen.
there's another
Amen to that.
program. It's a work ready program, and the kids they were they're juveniles, got into some kind of trouble, but they come to the barn and they're paid through the home that they live in to work at the barn. And when I tell you these, some of these are the boys be swearing they so doggone bad and everything else until they're in front of a horse. And then you see they how humble they become.
Mm.
And you're not so tough now, are you? And you know, they want to learn, and they want to do stuff to not quote unquote upset the horse. And you know, they look forward to coming to the barn. So that stopped before COVID, but that's something we want to, you know, get back going, that partnership once we're back in Philadelphia.
Wow. There's a lot happening there that you mentioned in regard to healing. It just sounds like that is um, at the heart of your work, is to help people heal and be transformed.
Yes. Yes.
So when you think about leaving a legacy, you've mentioned this in a couple different ways, like um, really setting the stage for the next generation. What legacy do you hope to leave behind through this work, the work of PURA, and your passion for horses?
So I wanted to, growing up, we couldn't compete on a high level because we had nice horses. They just weren't that nice.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have the resources, and financially we just couldn't do it. I want kids to be able to compete, city kids to compete on these high levels with horses that were, not only bred at home, but raised at home and taught at home, but by them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a couple horses now, their registered names have concrete in it. And going on even though I didn't place high my first time at Appaloosa World,
Uh-huh.
I cried when I got on the plane going back to Philly. And I cried because it was just, I did it. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a win for myself because I got out there and I did it. And, I know if I had that feeling as an adult, I know these kids are going to take as much pride in that. And they, especially, they're hearing their names because they don't get to hear. These are kids that they don't have cheerleaders at home, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't have like, a support system at home. A lot of them don't. So hearing them, just them hearing their own names and hearing their horse's name with something with concrete in it, I know it's going to, change them in ways that they would want to go ahead and change it for someone else once they're older. That is
Mm-hmm.
my overall goal. So every baby and every young horse, before it's registered, I throw concrete in their name some kind of way. So
Well, now we know what to look for in the
yes.
show ring. Absolutely.
Yes.
That's fantastic. So, how can we learn more about Pura and the Concrete Cowboy movie? Or where do we
Concrete
go for that?
Cowboy is
Hmm.
Concrete Cowboy is still on Netflix.
Okay.
I think it should be. And Pura, we are our website is the Pura, ThePura.org. And we've got 400,000 to go, and this barn should be done by the end of the year. And I swear it's going to be one of the most elite barns in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
But the city deserves it. And so you can visit our website if you want to support some kind of way, thepura.org. We are Philadelphia Urban Riding Academy on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay.
And Concrete Cowboy, there is a part 2 coming out within the next couple of years, which is based on my life story. So,
Oh my goodness. And we met you and we know you now. So we
right. So y'all
can
are
only hope.
my show family and friends. So.
That is right. We want to be first in line for the autograph. Oh, Erin.
Absolutely. Well,
Wow.
you guys have my love and stuff forever because it's, I've been treated like family and a
Mm.
friend and family in this industry since I started showing halter horses.
Oh, I love it. I am thankful that you are with us, and I am thankful that we are with you on this journey. Thank you so much for sharing just so many parts of your life and history and ways that we can help PURA and support this movement in Philadelphia. So thank you, Erin, for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was such a pleasure being here and speaking with you. I listened since you started. I've been listening to this podcast weekly. Like,
well, thank you.
Yes,
awesome.
And it's great for the newcomer, that has those questions, because this was not available to me. Where it's Clint Fullerton and the Holmans, like just hearing different perspectives and how to do things. So it's so helpful that I've been making mental notes every week, honestly, like, okay, maybe I could tweak this, or I'm doing this correct and stuff like that. So this is really an amazing platform that you established.
Well, thank you. You are one of the reasons that I do the work, and for that person who is learning and just getting started, because we need to open the gates wide for our new friends.
Yes.
So
yes.
Thanks, Erin.
You're welcome.
Hey, if you're an amateur or a professional willing to share your story or bring content that helps us with our halter horses, you can email me at fitforhalter@gmail.com.